Okay, so we're talking with Carol Rothman, writer of Creative Wooden Boxes from the Scroll Saw. Hi, Carol. How you doing?
Hi, Andrew. I'm fine. Good to speak to you.
Yeah. Well, we got a chance to talk to you last time about the wooden scroll saw bowls, and I loved that book. I used the patterns quite a bit, and I guess what's been happening since your last book?
Oh, all sorts of things. I've continued working with bowls, working with new laminations and different shapes and configurations. There's still a whole lot of stuff yet to explore there. That hasn't made it on the radar since I'm holding on to it. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it, but I'm keeping notes, and we'll see where that goes. And I returned to making boxes, which actually was where I got my start. The beginnings of my emergence on the scrolling scene began with a Ribbons and Bows box, which was a finalist in Scroll Saw Woodworking and Crafts 2007 design contest.
Oh.
And that's where I got my start. It caught the attention of the editor, who asked me to write it up as a project. That was the first project I ever wrote up. And she liked it and said, well, can you give me more? And at that point, I was working with bowls, and that's how the bowl book got going. But I've always had a love for boxes, and this gave me a chance to go back and return to my roots, as a matter, in a manner of speaking.
Yeah. Well, I'm taking a look at the book right now, and the wooden bow on the box on the front, it looks like something that my wife puts on top of the package and rips down with the scissors and everything else. It's beautiful.
Thank you. Actually, the inspiration for those bows came from my background as a cake decorator.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I made many cakes. For a while, it became very trendy to do these cakes that look like stacks of presents with loopy bows made out of sugar paste. And those are made by making individual loops that are then put into icing. So what I did was I did a simple compound cut to make a loop out of wood, and instead of icing, I used glue. So it was the same construction as on a cake, but in a completely different material.
Oh, wow. That's pretty cool. Yeah, I see the in the About the Author section, I remember seeing the picture with you holding the one box that's a cup that looks like the steam coming out of the coffee and all the stuff around you. The boxes look almost good enough to eat.
Well, actually, that apple tart box has slices of real cinnamon on it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which I think is really pretty cool. If you ever look at the end of a cinnamon stick, it's a very, very pretty pattern. It's actually cinnamon bark, and it curls up and sort of looks pretzel-shaped.
Oh, yeah, that's pretty cool.
So I looked at that one day, and I said, hey, I can slice this on my saw. I made the nicest smelling sawdust you'll ever.
Oh, yeah. Freshen up the shop a little bit with the project, right?
No, but it is wood. I
yeah.
mean, it legitimately was there, and I glued it on. I said, I have a cinnamon apple tart.
That's awesome. I've been noticing a few places, at least a couple of the magazines that I get by the month that have a couple articles from you in them, too.
Yep, I've been started to branch out. Actually, the current issue, I think it goes on the newsstand in the middle of the month, of Creative Woodworks and Crafts, has a box by me that looks like a braided loaf of bread.
Yep.
On a little laminated cutting board.
Yep, that was the latest one I remember seeing. It was I think I get mine a little early up in Wisconsin here, so I just got it and I thought, hey, I've talked to her.
Well, that sort of belongs with my Fun with Food chapter. That's where all the boxes are that look like food objects. And I said, okay, I can continue that. I haven't done a loaf of bread yet. It didn't make it into the book because it came to my mind after the book was out, but yeah, I've moved into there, and I have a second article coming out in Woodworker's Journal.
Oh, cool! It's another one I get, so I'll get to peruse that one when it comes to.
Yeah. About a year ago, I had an article, a bowl article that came out in it, and I made some inquiries and asked if they were interested in another scroll saw article because I had just done a review of scroll saws, and the editor said yes, but it's a particularly I really view it as a feather in my cap because it's a mainstream woodworking magazine.
Yeah. And
you very seldom see scrolled projects. So the ones that I write for them have a very mainstream look. So the box that's going to appear probably in the next issue or so, it's all been photographed and approved of and everything, is a conventional-looking little jewelry box with hinges and a removable insert that is absolutely adorable and done basically with bandsaw type method where you sort of take out the guts of the box, no joinery at all. So it looks mainstream, but is as simple to do as can be. So that got me really excited because, mainstream woodworking, you're getting the scroll saw out there as a real tool, not the sissy saw that I've heard people refer to it as.
Yeah. Yeah, well, there is some that have a misconception of the scroll saw. Mine may sit in the corner, but it's used for a lot of projects that I guess I wouldn't, when I bought it, I didn't consider it for those, but I look at it now and go, well, it's the easiest thing I have to do, ABC with, and there it goes.
Mm-hmm. And actually, my partner who makes furniture, he uses it for his dovetails, and he uses it for his mortises and tenons.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a valid use, where people would use a bandsaw. Often it's easier to use the scroll saw with a nice sturdy blade and use it for real woodworking instead of chiseling and stuff. It works very nicely there.
Oh yeah, I've done like a cabriole type leg, more like a faux one actually, that to go around things, and I actually can get closer to the line and have to do less sanding and less work with the rasp afterward than I can with the bandsaw. Because you goof with a bandsaw, your leg's done. You goof with a scroll saw, you have a little more sanding to do.
Well, you look at the scroll saw blades, and they're finer.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a finesse tool.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. When you're done with that, there's a lot less sanding and a lot less other things to do, especially with some of those real fine-tooth little blades. I mean, you can get right into corners and turn right back around and come right back out. And with a bandsaw, you're getting down in that corner with a chisel or a rasp or something other than a saw.
And, I discovered something interesting. I have another box that's going to be coming out in Scroll Saw Woodworking and Crafts with the lid looks like a maze, complete with ball bearings.
Oh, cool.
The editor said, can you do that? We've been thinking about that. So I learned how to make a maze, and I learned how to cut plexiglass and stuff. Now, plexiglass is not, you can't sand it the way you sand wood, so you have to cut straight. And I found by giving myself a mental set, it's almost like a Zen thing, focusing on going straight, the line came out amazingly straight. When I lost my focus, I began getting little ripples in it.
Oh, wow.
So that, since you don't use a fence or anything like that with the scroll saw, the idea of focus, of using your body, it's almost like when you drive, you look ahead, you sight ahead.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing. And I am now able to cut straight lines in a way that I never did before.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I never really thought about it before, but when I am on the scroll saw, for some reason I always put on some of my blues and my jazz.
Really?
And it always works fine. But if I put on some of the podcast things to listen to somebody talk where I'm not as focused, it never turns out as well. I never thought about it before, but I'm always like, I got to put on Nora Jones or B.B. King or something because it's going to cut good.
Now that's interesting.
Yeah, it's. I've got a little scroll saw, but it works great.
What kind do you have?
It's an older Dremel.
Uh-huh.
And it's just a small one. I picked it up secondhand. It was one of those where I went to buy a dust collector, and the guy had a jointer and a scroll saw that he wanted to unload as well, and the price was right. So I'm like, there's a few things I might want to do with that. My dad had done scroll saw stuff. I mean, he makes everything from yard stuff like you see a lot of people associate with it to some of the most beautiful clocks I've ever seen to a lot of different things with it. And I thought, it's fun. Dad has a good time. I'll try it out. And the more I use it, the more I find, hey, I'll try this. I'll try that. Cutting the legs. And like you said, dovetails, it's easy to just buzz it out of there. A dovetail, I figured I wasn't really good with the scroll saw when I started messing with them. Mm-hmm. And I knew I was going to have to chisel it if I cut it out by hand. So I'm like, well, this is faster.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, even if you just use it to remove the wood, so you have less to chisel out.
Yeah. And the more, it's like with any other tool. The more you use it, the more comfortable you are with it. So the closer to the line you're going to get.
Well, one of the things that I did with this book, if you look at the cupcake box, which is on the cover.
Yep.
Sort of my signature
Mm-hmm.
box. And it's attracted a lot of attention. I mean, that was a challenge for my editor. I mean, cutting the sprinkles, now that was really a finesse thing. But if you look at the base of it, you see that there are ridges on it, which I wanted to make it look like the real bottom of a cupcake. I experimented with trying to cut little wedges and stuff. Remember, you're cutting it at an angle, and that distorts everything. Well, I used a blade I'd never used before. Are you familiar with the spiral blades for the scroll saw?
Yes. Yeah, you can cut in pretty much any direction.
Yeah. They're basically like you take a bunch of blades and twist them together so you have teeth in all directions.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people use them for the portraits so that they have maximum flexibility,
Yeah.
but hardly anyone uses huge ones. Well, I happen to have on hand a number 7 spiral. Now, that is a hefty blade.
That's a big blade.
And in fact, the ends of it are so thick that I use a Hegner, and they have special blade holders that are meant to hold thicker blades. I had them actually move up to that.
Oh, wow.
And by using that, pushing it in and out, I developed a motion. It gave me the look that I wanted. It was a completely unexpected use of a blade I'd never used before. And I said, damn, this is neat. This is easy, it's precise, it's just quick in and out, and you end up with an amazing effect.
Yeah, and I know my dad has used them for a few things, and there's a couple people up at the Woodcraft here that they use the spiral blade, and I know it's a thin one, but they have the entire Last Supper on a huge chunk of wood that they said had to be supported on the ends when they cut it, and it was all cut with the spiral blade and everything, and the detail you can get with them too is just amazing.
But when you first start using it, it's really quite an eye-opener because you put pressure where normally you can safely put pressure, and it just cuts right through.
It cuts right through. There goes that guy's hand on the portrait.
But actually, I just made a YouTube video of the cupcake box.
Oh, okay. Well,
I now have actually, I think I have 22 YouTube videos split between food videos. So for me, you can learn how to make biscotti or shaped bialys, and woodworking videos.
Well, they both take a certain amount of talent to get them done right.
But I wanted to make sure what I'm trying to do with this new book is that where there are specific techniques that may be a little fidgety and not familiar and better shown than just written about, we're going to make a series of YouTube videos. I post them on my blog, and they're on YouTube, that show how to do the techniques. And I figure that this, the books are not yet digitized, and they don't come with matching DVDs and stuff like that. So this is sort of my way of giving demonstrations. Because if I put a book out there, my patterns out there, I want to do everything I can to ensure that whoever works with them will come out with a product that they're proud of.
Yep, and I know from previous experience that if you have a question, I've gotten, before I even had a chance to talk with Carol, I've gotten a good response, and from you and the rest of the community out there on the forums. Some of the Scrollsaw forums are some of the most friendly and most helpful ones I have ever been on.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the one that I'm active on, the one that is sponsored by the publisher of the book, Fox Chapel, is a whole community out there.
Oh, yeah.
In fact, it's right at the end of March, the Northeastern Woodworkers has their big show up at Saratoga Springs, and I'm giving 2 demos there, which is nice. I was invited to do 2 bowl-making demos, and a whole group of us are going to be staying at the same motel, and the night before the show, we're all meeting at the local Dunkin' Donuts for a big get-together. And it'll be interesting because these are people you've only, shared posts with, and you maybe see from their little avatars what they look like. Mm-hmm. But now we're actually going to meet each other in the flesh, and it should be really a lot of fun.
Well, that'll be cool. Yeah, I remember going down to Woodworking in America the first time, and actually sitting down and talking with the people that I've been talking to online for years, and actually saying, "Hi, I am." It was great.
Yeah. But what's weird is since through my videos, they all know what I look like and sound like. Mm-hmm. But I don't have that information about them.
Yeah. Speaking of your videos, if anyone listening hasn't had a chance to visit Carol's blog, there is a link to it on the links page on the Ravinheart Renditions site too, and it's right on that links page. So check it out. It's worth seeing. I've seen all the videos. So it sounds like there's a new one I got to go check out too, though.
Well, one of the things that I added to my blog, they gave the option of adding a little search feature. So if someone wants to put, searching videos or sanding or cupcakes or something like that, they can easily find a post if it's one of the older ones.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, it's always a quick way to find something you're looking for, too.
Yeah. So, because after a couple of years, you get a whole bunch of posts there, and it becomes hard to search through to find the one you're looking for.
Yeah. So I have a question for you about the scroll saws. If someone was considering doing some of these things and they wanted to use the scroll saw for a bigger part of their hobby, the woodworking part of it, what do you think someone would do to say, okay, I want to get a scroll saw. I don't want to go over the top, but I don't want to have a cheap one that I don't want to get along with. What's maybe a couple of real good ones, and then just a basic set of tools. What would you say somebody should get?
Okay, well, the first thing, and this is a tricky one, I would say to buy the very best scroll saw you can. It's hard when you're just getting into a hobby and you don't want to make a big investment.
Mm-hmm.
But if you start out with a tool that has a lot of vibration, that's fidgety with the blade clamps, that doesn't saw, there's a problem sometimes with back-to-front movement not being a true up and down, which makes control difficult.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have a hard time, and it's not going to be fun.
It's I guess that would be the same as I started out with a rather inexpensive table saw the first time, and my cast iron steel top, really nice table saw cuts so much nicer than that one ever did. I built a lot of stuff with the old one,
mm-hmm.
but now that I have this one, I wonder how I ever did it.
I did the bowl book I did at the community wood shop. I now have my own tools.
Mm-hmm.
I sort of outgrew the community wood shop tools, and they had a mid-price. Is it okay to mention specific stores and stuff?
It's fine. We're not affiliated with anything. We can say whatever we want.
I have lobbied, actually. I just dredged up on Amazon. It was 5.5 years ago that I was able to successfully lobby to get a pinless scroll saw, and we went with the DeWalt 788.
Okay.
Which was, even though it was the Type 2, which is made abroad and has become pretty problematic, it was considered the best mid-type saw, meaning a saw around $500 or so.
Yeah.
And I did the bowl book on it, and it held up pretty well. It was starting to get some problems toward the end of it. When I got my own shop, I said, okay, this is probably, I am retired, so this is probably the only scroll saw I'm ever going to get. I went with the top of the line, and I got a Hegner.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
The difference between the two in the absence of vibration and the trueness of the cut and the ease with which I can precisely get the blades in the holders, even though you need a tool, for someone like me with limited hand strength, it's a very positive way of putting it in to making sure it's absolutely straight. It was like day and night.
Yeah.
Stuff that I couldn't do, like, sand the interior of a box with wood that's 1.5 inches thick, and you want to do it with no bowing so that when you're done, the inner piece will slide out in both directions.
Mm-hmm.
I always had trouble with that. And when I switched to the better tool, it was like magic.
Yeah. I know using a couple of, I'm not going to downplay any names, but a couple of the less expensive ones that you may pick up at some of the regular chain stores or whatever. I've tried a couple of them that people have had, and like you said, the vibration was just awful. And for some reason, my saw is far from a Hegner, but I added some weight to the bottom. I mounted it in a certain way. I made a new base for it, and I took almost all the vibration out of it. I really tweaked it, and I'm happy with it the way it is. But when I go over and use my dad's, which is way nicer than mine, I know there's a difference.
Well, if someone started and say, listen, I can only afford, X amount of money, well, you get it. Yep. You learn on it. And I'm certainly not a tool snob.
No.
It's actually the skill of the operator more than the tool very often that determines the product.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, you can learn on it, and if at some point you find you've outgrown it, then you'll deal. I mean, people pick things up on Craigslist.
Oh yeah.
And then sometimes you can really luck out and get a very good deal. But I would think that if it's at all possible, if you start out with a good tool, it'll be easier and more rewarding right from the get-go. Unfortunately, with the DeWalt 788, a lot of people have started having a lot of reliability problems and poor customer service.
Oh, that's too bad.
And one woman had such a hard time that I spearheaded a forum-wide movement to write to DeWalt, which I think is now Delta Porter Cable, I think it's all the same company, to write to the president. And I generated a form letter, and I put it out there for people to use and adapt. So many of us sent letters complaining about the lack of customer service and responsiveness and poor treatment. Nobody got any response.
Oh, wow.
And that was very disheartening. It's like it's being treated like the stepchild of their tool chain.
Yeah.
And people found that many of the technicians, the repair people, did not know how to do a skull saw. They were used to the heavier, bigger stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
it's not like it's a fly-by-night thing. I mean, they've been around forever, and I know from people in construction that I know, they've always stood behind like their batteries and all their big power tools and everything. It's too bad to hear it's going the other way with some of their tools.
Well, now Delta's coming out with what looks like basically the DeWalt, which I think is being discontinued. There are things happening.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know if this will be better quality control. I mean, the DeWalt down at the shop that I used, the center hole on the original one we got was stamped in the wrong place. They sent a replacement, which was just as bad. We just gave up and we just sort of rasped, enlarged it, and said enough's enough. But that's still a $500 tool. You can buy a bandsaw for that money.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So it's. I think I would say to somebody, if you're going to spend any money at all, check the online reviews, check customer service, find out if they'll stand behind it. Because what's the point of having a saw if it gets broken and you can't get it fixed?
Yeah, well, like mine, I picked mine up secondhand, and I had a blade holder. Actually, the pins that hold it in broke, and I called them up, and they said, "Well, that shouldn't break." And I says, "Well, I didn't buy it. How much are they?" They said, "No, that shouldn't break. We'll send you a new blade holder pin and everything."
Oh, that's real nice.
So I'm like, "Hey, they do that. I'm buying a bigger one from them next time because I know they stand behind it."
Yeah. Yeah, by the way, in addition to getting a good scroll saw, you need good blades, and the place to get blades is not in the stores.
No, unfortunately, I found that out too. Most of mine are the Flying Dutchman.
Yeah, that's just about the only brand that I buy.
Well, at least I followed good on that one.
Yeah, I buy them online. There's one supplier who seems to be the supplier, and gives good service and advice. And a decent price.
Yep, and I think there's probably a link to his on my website too.
Everyone knows whom we're talking about.
Yep.
And well, if someone's going to deliver, and if someone's going to be helpful, and if you write and say, "Hey, I need your advice. What should I get?" and he will tell you. But when I first started scrolling, and I taught myself, I bought John Nelson's excellent book, beginner book, and I worked my way through the lessons. I mean, there was no one around to help me. And I bought different brand blades and different configurations and kept a chart to see which would cut, which would. And I was amazed how you could get two blades that were supposedly the same, and one would go through it like butter, and the other would bog down.
Oh yeah, and I've noticed the same thing. I've gotten some. I don't know why I never picked up many of the real small ones, but some of the larger for thicker stock. I had luck with PS Woodwork. Some of their blades too. They didn't seem to have the longevity of some of the other ones, but when they cut, they cut. At least on the thicker stuff. I can't say nothing one way or the other about their thin ones, though.
Well, sometimes some blades may be better for some purposes than others. I just did some of my first cutting with Corian, which I'd never cut before.
Oh. And
I was making a menorah. This will show up in the Creative Woodworks and Crafts probably next holiday season. And I wanted to make it out of Corian, the holders out of Corian.
Oh, cool.
So I went on eBay, which is a great place to get small amounts of things.
Mm-hmm.
And I was told to use a polar blade, and I'd never used a polar blade. And it just cut through, and I said, oh, my God. I mean, it was absolutely amazing. It was just like cutting wood.
Oh, so now what's the difference with a polar blade?
I don't know. If the teeth configuration it's sort of weird. It looks very toothy. It doesn't have the wide spacing. It doesn't have the delicacy. But this apparently is the go-to blade.
Oh, well, I'll have to keep that in mind.
Corian and also for the acrylic.
Oh, okay. Okay, now I have, I don't remember what brand they were, but I picked up a couple of, in the store kind of things, and they were supposed to be made for acrylic, and it cut it okay. I know I heated the end instead of sanding, stuff like that, but, so yeah, they must be similar to that. I'll have to look into that next time I try to venture.
First time I cut acrylic, as I cut it, it melted behind me, and I said, no, I'm not doing something right. So I slowed down the speed, and I used the polar blade, and it went through. And then it went through. This was half-inch corian, and it cut beautifully. It's interesting, when I drilled it, it's sort of like this white stuff comes up, sort of like plastic.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. It was really, really quite an interesting thing. I turned out very neat little candle holders, which I was able to actually shape and bevel on my vertical belt sander.
Oh,
but
cool.
It's fun experimenting with new materials.
Yeah, at the we have in southern Wisconsin, there's the Midwest Scroll Saw Show, and I actually got to talk to some of the people from Fox Chapel and the forum that you were speaking of. I think I have more hits on the video when I got to talk to Shannon Flowers than any other video I have, by probably 4 and 5, even maybe up to 10 times more than any other video. But yeah, they had a lot of Corian projects. There was only 3 or 4 different booths, but just some beautiful stuff that they were doing too.
Yeah, I've seen beautiful fretwork done in Corian. I saw a Corian box, and it's interesting. I know somebody, one of the guys on the forum who lives in Hawaii, has made bowls out of Corian.
Oh, wow.
That I haven't done. I'm not sure if you use a CA glue or what to glue the rings together. The regular wood glue does not hold up with Corian.
Mm-hmm.
But I was actually able to make bowls. So I said, this is, well, they make sinks out of Corian. So
yeah, why not?
So that was pretty cool.
Cool.
So let's see. So if you're starting out, you get your scroll saw and your blades, but you also need sanders, because if you scroll, you sand.
Yep.
And we have my shop occupies a 2-foot width of a 1-car garage, so everything's on mobile bases. Mm-hmm. And in addition to my scroll saw, I have a nice array of the basic sanders, and I have been doing so much with the combo sander, the belt sander, and the disc sander combo. Mm-hmm. I treated myself to a nice jet floor model, because we don't have cabinet space. We had more floor space. It actually worked out to be better with a 6-inch belt. And in my box book, I have some boxes that have a lot of beveled edges. Some of the furniture boxes, my little miniature furniture suite, have beveled edges, and some of the jewelry boxes, all done with that belt sander.
Oh, cool.
It's easier. I remember reading in a John Nelson article a long time ago where he said it's easier to sand in a 45-degree angle than to try to cut it in. Mm-hmm. And if you cut it in, you have to tweak it anyway, because it's not going to be flat.
No.
And I experimented. I did the little bevels on this Corian. When I did the ring boxes with the little 5-millimeter barrel hinges, those real little guys, mm-hmm. and you need to make relief bevels in the rear so the box will open, I just sand those right in.
Oh, wow.
So I do the outside sanding, I sand outer curves with it. It's the most amazingly versatile tool, and it struck me that no one has ever really written a comprehensive guide to sanders, how to use all the different kinds of sanders, other than just the basics. And
and there are a lot more out there than, you think about it, and there's a sander, and most people think, well, there's the palm sander, and there's the standy-up belt one. Right. And that's all you really hear about. And I know I've got more than that in this shop.
Well, I got a spindle sander, mm-hmm. which I like, because you don't need it all that often, but when you do, for those internal curves.
Sure.
It is just, it's just amazing. I also treated myself to the jet on that, not the big floor model, but the hefty countertop model.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes all the way up. You can get an optional 3-inch spindle. So I can go all the way down from, the real little guy up to the big one. And that is, if someone can afford any kind of a spindle sander, that's well worth having.
Okay. Now I have an older, most of my stuff is secondhand, so I have an older secondhand spindle sander. And would you suggest if somebody's going to get one that they get one that has the table that tilts?
I find it very useful.
Okay.
Because if you're going to do something that's cut at an angle,
mm-hmm.
When you sand it, you have to remember that it's only at the top that you have the angle. I once ruined an early attempt at a bowl by going down the sides and completely sanding away my gluing edge.
Oh, whoops.
And I know there are people who use ones that don't tilt, they just tilt the wood. So you can get away. If you have one that is just vertical, if you're careful and watch your angle, you can get away with it.
Yep, and that's the way mine's set up. If anybody's going to do that, be real careful. You can sand your thumbnail off very quickly. I found out after doing it once, you learn not to do it again. So.
Well, I actually found that the belt, I don't know how many miles per hour that thing goes, but geez, if you're not careful, you really get bitten pretty bad.
It doesn't take long either.
In fact, when I had the photo shoot for the Woodworkers Journal article, I checked my hands, and most of the little scabs had healed. Because, you do the close-up work of your fingers. You don't want these little scabs showing. That's not very aesthetic, even though they can Photoshop it out. But, yeah, you got to be careful. I've learned when I did even in the cupcake box, I tilt the rings so it'll sort of look swirly, which means putting it flat on the belt sander and putting more pressure on one side than the other.
Oh, sure.
And you got to be careful with that. It works really neatly, but you really have to make sure that your fingers are nowhere near that belt.
Mm-hmm.
So, and let's see, I use the little sanders that chuck into the drill press too. I love the King Arthur, I guess, is the main distributor of those inflatable sanders.
Yes, yeah, I picked one of those up for various things, and they work great. I like them too, the inflatable sanders, and they have, I don't even know how many different attachments they have now that are great, yeah. What about the, like a flap sander? Is there any, do you use much of those at all?
Well, actually, I had, about a year or so ago, I decided to get a sand flea.
Okay.
Which has the drum, and I really wanted a regular drum sander, but I'd have to give up my freezer in the garage, and I can't give up my freezer. So we use that one down at the community shop. We go down there, we change the paper that someone's gotten crud all over, and I use it. But I decided to get a sand flea because I wanted to get a better finish on my blanks. When you do anything with stacked rings, like on the cover of the book, that bow box is basically made with bowl techniques. I sort of snuck those in. If your rings aren't flat, they're not going to glue up nicely.
No.
So I thought it was an awful lot of money for what looked like a big box with a motor. But I said, hey, it comes in a little 9-inch version, and that I can fit into my garage. Well, I found that works beautifully for flattening out, small pieces of wood. You roll it over, and the grits go on with a hook and loop, so it's really very easy to change the grits.
Oh, okay.
But I also found that by getting the optional fence for it, it turns it into a jointer.
Oh, cool.
And if you have to joint a 4-inch piece of wood, well, you don't want to do this on a jointer.
No, not really.
So that I found that was really, really very, very, very good. But I still use those little mouse sanders that Black & Decker put out. Mm-hmm. I still have mine from several years ago. It is great when you have flat sanding.
Ah, cool.
It's just really, really good. I am told that the newer models of it are not as well made as the earlier one, but so what else is new?
Yeah, that's just about anything. That's why I have hand planes that are well over 100 and some years old that work so much better than the brand new ones.
But I also found my primitive flattening tool is a granite tile with a sheet of sandpaper, about 120 grit, that I attach with temporary spray adhesive. And if I need to flatten a ring, if I discover there are little spaces and I need to flatten one part a little bit, rubbing it on that and selectively varying the pressure works amazingly.
Yep.
And I discovered also that was the reason why I never had trouble gluing up teak. Now, it sounds like I'm coming from left field, but I mean, teak is a nice wood to use for boxes and bowls, but it has a reputation of being very difficult to glue up because of the oils.
Mm-hmm.
But I read somewhere that instead of using acetone, as people do, to try to dry it off before they glue it, which this person felt actually tended to draw up more oil, that if you sand it right before you glue it, you get a clean surface. If you glue it immediately, you will get a good glue joint. And I said, okay, so that's why I've always had no trouble with it.
That's something to remember on some of my outdoor projects, too.
Really?
Yeah. Cool.
So that's it. Actually, teak is also interesting because it has silica in it, which is why it dulls tools so quickly. I never knew that.
Yeah, teak is teak, and the other one escapes me that's so hard on tools that way because of the chemicals in it. I can't remember the other one offhand, but there's two of them that I know of that are just a bear on stuff.
But, you know, the scroll saw blades, they're so cheap that you really have to discipline yourself. As soon as you find yourself pushing, stop, blow the 30 cents.
Yeah. It's not like changing a table saw blade or anything. Just
no, not hardly. In fact, it's hard for people to get used to the idea that you don't use the blade until it breaks. You know, so sometimes, and sometimes you get wood where you have to use several blades on a project.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the way it is.
Yep. Sometimes it's a little more difficult grain.
Okay, what else can I tell you about?
Well, I guess the only other thing as far as the tools go is, I guess there's some people that have asked me about like the scroll saw drilling the holes when you're doing the bowls and everything, and they're like, well, what kind of drill press should I get? And I'm like, well, if you have a drill press, you can use one, but you need to use some pretty small, drill bits in it. But like you put in your book, just a basic Dremel, corded or uncorded, either way, seems to work better than a drill press usually.
Yeah, actually, it really does. I have a whole set of little angle guides. You quick and you cut them on the scroll saw and you tweak them on the sander, and you write the angle on it, and then it's there. And with a little bit of care, you mark your hole with an awl so the little blade, the little bit doesn't go skittering all over the place.
Yep.
But it works really, really well. You get the hang of it, and you learn to, since the blades, those little bits tend to be very short, you can't use the guide all the way through, but once you get started in at the right angle, if you pull that guide away, you just go right through. Or you can make all sorts of elaborate jigs for your drill press, and my drill press does have a chuck that will go all the way down. I made them, before I ordered it, I made them check with the manufacturer to make sure the chuck would go down and take little teeny bits. But if you're just doing occasional projects, you really don't want to spend the time getting hung up with making elaborate jigs and stuff. That's great for production work. But I go for quick and easy, and if someone wants to make one bowl, they want to focus on the bowl. They don't want to focus on all the things they will need before they can get to the bowl.
No, and a lot of people have a Dremel, or they have the small hand sanders, and almost anybody that does any kind of woodworking, and even some people that don't, have sandpaper.
Yeah.
And
well, I tell people that if they're, starting out, use a soft wood. I mean, I started out using aspen, which is wonderful to work with. And actually, if you sand it up well and then give it a good clear coat finish, it looks like ivory. Or mahogany is a nice soft wood, or even poplar if you can get a pretty piece that doesn't have ugly green blotches on it. Work well for the intarsia people who want that color, but otherwise it doesn't work. But, if you use a soft enough wood, you can do some hand sanding. Save the harder wood for the mechanical sanders. And in fact, with some really, really hard wood, like Jatoba, I will use that only for bowls that will not require a lot of sanding and shaping, because it's just too hard.
Yeah, there's some wicked stuff out there.
Oh, yeah, I mean, it's pretty. You can finish up. I mean, Ipe finishes up gorgeously, but you don't want to have to do a lot of sanding on that.
No, you want to be close to that line.
I also want to use a lot of dust protection. Some of these more exotic woods can be pretty toxic.
Mm-hmm. And actually, even walnut is
Really?
walnut is one that you want to really make sure that you use your dust collection and your respirators with too.
I've been wondering about with some of the woods that have nuts and people with allergies to various nuts and stuff. When you're making bowls, I haven't even seen this explored, if there are certain woods whose oils might create problems.
Oh yeah, I'd never thought of that either. I'll have to, when I'm given some of them as gifts, I'll have to make sure I keep that in mind.
You wouldn't think about it, but there's so much more to think about now, and everyone is so much more vigilant.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of it, at least as far as what wood there is, some of the finish may actually keep that in there. Once the finish wears through, if it's used a lot and it wears through the finish, then you might have to worry. But I think a lot of the finish might keep some of that in, though. But yeah, I'd like to see it looked into too.
Yeah, I really don't. I've seen the suggestion there. In terms of looking for what you use, what woods you're using, what finishes you're using, to think in terms of allergies, particularly for people who make toys, where kids might put things in their mouth.
Yep.
Or if I'm making a bowl, for example, I'll tend to use shellac rather than lacquer because shellac is food safe.
Yeah, shellac. And that's most of what I use, either spray or I ended up wiping it on in a couple different ways. But shellac is the one I use the most on the bowls and in a lot of the scroll saw projects, because I can get 3-4 coats on it a day.
Well, actually, I've developed my system. I always use shellac as a sealer coat to seal up the wood. It also reveals any glue spots when you have time to sand them out. And then I use a sanding mop when I can, when the project shape allows it, a 320 grit sanding mop. And what that does is it sort of buffs up the shellac. It takes off, the roughness that you get when you put your sealer coat on, and gives you a very good look at what you've got. And if that looks good, then I go ahead and I apply several coats, either of shellac, or I like the clear spray lacquer.
Oh, yeah.
It dries even faster than shellac.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's a fast drying one, too. You can get a few coats on in a day with that.
Yeah. And then I use the gloss, and then I usually just rub it down a little bit with steel wool just to take it down a bit.
Oh, cool.
But to give that, since my projects are small, they don't use up a lot of material, so the cost of using the sprays isn't prohibitive. And for the loops and stuff like that, you really need something that will get into those spaces.
Sure. Yeah. I imagine some of even the cupcake and a couple of those the different furniture boxes that you had in this book and those bows especially, it sure must work a lot better with a spray than trying to wipe it in little places.
It really does. By the way, the shellac also, on some of the boxes where I've used the fibers, the flocking finish inside, I had read somewhere, and I find it was very, very good advice before even beginning to finish that, to give it a sealer coat, because that prevents, I use acrylic paint instead of the color-coordinated glue, which is much more expensive, and the acrylic paint works fine, but it keeps it from getting sucked up too fast. Oh,
that makes a lot of sense, too.
Yeah. And particularly like with the wood like mahogany, which is very porous, it just likes to slurp it right up.
Oh, yeah.
That way you're giving it a sound foundation. And I've seen in some of the serious finishing books, using shellac quite a bit in between different applications of things just to keep things separate. And it's a very, probably underutilized. It's underappreciated, I think. It's just shellac. It's a finish that's been around forever.
Yeah, but it works.
It's a very, very nice finish.
Yeah, my workbench has got amber shellac on top, and it's really nice that I can ding it up and make a mess out of it, and put a little more on there, scuff it up, it's good to go, and they blend into each other perfectly. None of the newer stuff. I put some shellac on something that I just sanded through, and you won't even know that it was sanded right there if I do it just right.
Yeah, it's very good for repairing. So so I said, this is what I do when I've tried oil finishes, and I find that for the kind of work that I do, which is more decorative, the higher gloss that I get with the clear coat finishes just works better. And if you're doing anything with drawers, I mean, you got to watch out for odors. I mean, if you've ever inadvertently put oil in the interior of a drawer, you'll never, ever get the smell out.
That'll be there forever.
Yeah,
Yep.
so I tried here and there. I said, okay, let me not just stick to the same thing all the time. And for my kind of work, the oil finishes just really don't look as good as the others. And if I'm doing a cutting board or something like that, I may do that. I like Boo's Mystery Oil, which is probably just expensive mineral oil, but I like working with it. It smells nice, so you'll make a project and give it the next day. You don't have to wait a month for all odors to dissipate.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You know, and it brings out the grain just enough so it doesn't look like raw wood. So, you know, that I will use, or some of my collapsible baskets that I've had fun making, that you just sort of swoosh the oil all over the place. I use that because it's not toxic. You know,
Yeah.
I feel nice using it, and it smells good, and I can give it happily, knowing whatever anyone puts in it, it's not going to hurt anybody. So, I do what works for me. I try to keep it simple. I mean, you do one of my projects, you're not going to be tied up for 3 weeks. No.
Well, and that's one, and the thing is that I liked about the bowls what drew me to the bowls in the first place, and what makes me come back to now I've got to try some of these boxes too, is you don't need this. Now, I have a stockpile of wood, but my stockpile of cutoffs, I can make this stuff.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so if you just want to go out and buy a couple boards to try something, you don't have to invest a fortune. And with me, I take and make furniture. I take the cutoffs and make things like the bowls and the boxes and a few other little projects that my dad and I do together. I take the cutoffs from that, and we make fishing lures, and my dad takes that and does some of his project. We waste almost nothing.
Oh, you know what happens is you end up with boxes full of all these little pieces you cannot throw away.
Well, you can't get rid of it. It's good wood yet.
I know. I mean, I have my precious little piece of ebony. I used it for a couple of projects in this book. And I have little scraps. I mean, I am throwing away nothing of that.
Yeah, that's a spendy piece of wood.
By the way, I found another nice way to get a lot of bang for the buck is using veneer when you do laminations. I sort of copied from the bolt turners, you know, there's segmented bowls and things like that, putting little pieces of veneer, like the box on the cover is a piece of 1/2-inch Purple Heart that has veneer, light veneer, on either side of it. And you can buy a whole bunch of veneer for very little money. I think I have a lifetime supply of veneer under my bed. I have 3 boxes of veneer under my bed. And it just adds a little touch of elegance, that little bit of separation. It's a lot cheaper than the thin woods that can be very expensive. If you price them by the board foot, they're a fortune. Mm-hmm. And then I started playing with more. It just makes the simplest box look prettier. And, you know, you get what looks like something elegant that's really very basic.
Yeah, it just adds a little something.
Yeah, I think I have some pivot lid boxes in here that were fun to play with. And I have kind of like a plain and fancy version. You can make it plain, add a little veneer, and looks like a completely different project. Cool. And if you mess up the project completely, maybe you've wasted $2.50 worth of wood. You know, it's like it's not. You haven't wasted weeks of work and really expensive wood. And if it was costly wood, well, you know, it's maybe it was an 8x8 piece. Yeah. And you can live with that. Mm-hmm. So my thoughts are, these are doable projects. I mean, I myself have only been scrolling for less than 6 years from the time I first picked up Nelson's book. So you don't need a lifetime of expertise. You don't need big bucks. You don't need fancy equipment or a lot of time. And I try to make my instructions clear enough to make, you know, easy for anyone to follow, because I think it's almost sadistic the way some instructions are written. It's like no one will be able to make this for me. Yep. Here, look at what I've done. Ha ha ha. Right. Well, reading through more than one of your books and several of your articles, and going through your blog, I agree with you. You put out some quality material that's easy to understand, and you're more than willing to help when there's questions too. So, well, hey, if I put it out there, I'm going to stand behind it. That's the way it should be. So what's coming up next for Carol? Well, I'm starting to add to my little furniture suite of boxes. I'm currently trying to put a little bed box together where the quilt lifts off and has a bed. I'm not sure how that'll work out. But I'm sort of taking the themes that I've done, the boxes, and pushing them to the next level, a little more interesting, a little more elegant. But I find that the really new ideas tend to just fly in out of nowhere. All of a sudden I'll see something and say, oh, wait a second, I can do this. So I know some of the things that I will be doing, which will be furthering the kinds of projects I've been working on, a little more elegant, a little more interesting, a little twist. But I cannot predict. You know, like, who would have thought I would have made a cupcake box?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
that sort of thing. But I'm definitely still very involved with the bowls. And actually the last chapter here, which I call Artistic Boxes, are made with the stacked rings.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to put in something for people who were doing bowls and wanted to learn a little bit more about it, you know, without having to come out with a new bowl book. So I'm working there. I mean, I still have not pushed my segmented bowls that you can make with the scroll saw. I've kept that. The projects I've put out, I've kept the technique under wraps. So I'm looking to still push the envelope and do more with this whole stacked ring approach.
Okay, cool. Yeah, the one that I'm trying to remember. I think it was the bonus box or the round bonus box.
Right.
I love the way that box. That I've got to try that one.
Okay, and it really was a bonus box. So I put all this work into making the glue up for that decorative center ring, and I have a chunk left over. I am going to use it. So I thought that was pretty cool. It was the same colors. It was the last of my nice ebony. Mm-hmm. But I said, let me just capitalize, you know, use that. Because as you know, if you cut out a center of something, well, you got to use that center for something.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So I looked at that. It's actually a very easy-to-make box, and anyone who's done bowls will say, oh, yeah, I recognize this. This is familiar.
Yeah. And
I put in new friends. The ruffled edge of one of the vases in my bowl book became the crust for the apple tart box. It's just like a very big ruffled rim.
Oh, okay, cool.
So it's like using what I know and then incorporating new things. So what I'm looking at really is the stacked rings and everything that's based on that as a technique rather than a dedicated way just to make bowls. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking in terms of techniques rather than just projects.
Cool.
So I put this and this and this together, and it comes out with something totally different. And what really is cool about this is that most people would never guess these were made with a scroll saw.
No. You look at some of the artistic part of it, to look at it, it looks like when you just look at the picture of some of these, you're like, oh my God, what does it have to take to make that? And you go through and you're like, okay, it's a process. It's a compound cut and some sanding, and you do things a certain way. You take something that looks just like the ribbon on the front cover. It looks like, how the heck am I going to make that? But you read through the steps and you're like, oh, you know what? I think I'm going to give it a shot.
Yeah, I will be doing a video at some point on making loops and things, so just in case anyone has any questions about it.
Good.
I mean, it's easy. Once I discovered that you get that curvy part at the end by drilling the right size hole, then you don't have to worry about coming around the curve. And why did I do that? Because you should see what my earlier loops looked like. I mean, I was about 1 to 3 on success, and I said, no, I gotta find a better way. So in a way, if you know too much, it makes it harder to write a book for every man or every woman. Mm-hmm. If you're still learning, then you have to be explicit because you need it. And you know what people need to know because you don't know anything.
It actually sounds like that makes complete sense to me.
Listen, have you ever heard someone who was brilliant, who had been woodworking, since they were 14 years old, and they do this and that and this and that, but they can't explain what they do because by this point it's so intuitive that it doesn't occur to them.
A lot of things are like that, trying to explain. Like, I work on computers for a living, so try to explain exactly how, it gets from point A to point B and crosses through all these things, and I'm like, I can see it in my head. I don't know how to explain it to you.
Right. Yeah, and that happens in woodworking too. Mm-hmm. So some of the most brilliant woodworkers and brilliant technicians may be very poor teachers.
And some people teach and some people just can't.
Well, listen, hey, I was a lifetime teacher, so watch that. Interestingly, I found on my Facebook page the other day a letter from a student who I had. Now, I was a college teacher. I'm a clinical psychologist. I mean, that's my training. And I was a college teacher for over 30 years. And I found a letter from somebody who said, I was at your college between 1975 and 79, which goes back a ways. And she happened to see some of my woodworking books and made the connection and still remembers my classes. And sort of followed me up, and I thought that was really cool.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah, and if I had asked her to look at a video, she'd probably recognize my teaching style.
Yep.
I once taught psychology, and now I teach how to make cupcakes out of wood. You know, teaching's teaching.
Yep. Well, one's therapeutic in one way, and one's therapeutic in another.
Well, I'll tell you, how many people find woodworking therapeutic? They just go and they zone out in their shop.
Oh, and I actually have I posted a thing out there about this Tom Iovino down in Florida, a very big blogger. He blogs a lot. Put out a thing about this is get woodworking week. Like, just get in your shop and try to help somebody who isn't woodworking get started at it and just build something. And last week I had the whole thing of, instead of waiting for that day on the weekend and working my butt off all week to get that one day on the weekend, I said, it's the elusive day on the weekend that gets ate up by something else anyway. If I got 5 minutes, I'm going in the shop.
Mm-hmm.
I did a week of I got more done in a week just spending 5 minutes or a half hour down here than I ever got done on the weekend anyway, and I felt more relaxed the entire week.
Well, the nice thing about wood is it doesn't talk back to you. You don't have to reason with it. It just lies there and lets you do stuff to it.
Yep.
And I think that is totally cool.
Yep. Well, Carol, I think I've taken up enough of your time. I thank you very much for talking with us again. And anybody listening, if you make a comment on the post that this video is with on Ravinheart Renditions, you're entered for, it would be end of February, beginning of March, we'll be giving away a copy of Created Wooden Bowls from the Scroll Saw. So, thank you very much, Carol.
Oh, thank you, and it was my pleasure, and maybe I'll talk to you again after the next book.
Well, I hope we get to see a lot more from you, and I hope we do get to talk to you in the next one.
Okay, thanks. And listen, enjoy working in your shop.
And thank you.